Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Doris Ballard. This program is available on Concord TV's Channel 22, on demand at yourconcordtv.org, on our YouTube channel, as well as on an iTunes as a free podcast. My guest today is going to be talking about an issue that has been out in the news a lot lately, and I think you're going to keep hearing it. And now you're going to be able to hear what's happening new in Concord. And my guest, welcome, Cheryl Coletti-Lawson, Board Chair for Hope for New Hampshire Recovery.
Thank you.
Now, you've got a personal story to share with us today to get us started, but I have to say to the people from Concord that you have a new location that just opened up in Concord on South State Street.
Correct, yes.
And so we'll find out about what's happening over there and how people can help and what your mission is. But you also have, and there's one in Manchester, and there's one in Newport Dairy. We'll be talking a lot about all of those locations. But the first question I asked you when we met, Cheryl, is why are you involved on the board? What prompted you to become involved with this wonderful organization that is so needed today? And why don't you tell us your story?
Okay, so how I became involved with the organization. Well, I'm a person in recovery, and what that means for me is I haven't had to have a drink in over 4 years. And because of that, I'm very grateful, and I believe it's an opportunity to give back, and really it's something I'm passionate about. So 3 years ago, I am a member of the BIA, the Business and Industry Association, and the Business and Industry Association was given a seat on the Governor's Commission for Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery. So Jim Roach, the president of the BIA, knew my personal story, and he asked me if I wanted that seat, and I graciously accepted it, and I've been sitting on that commission for 3 years. It was that seat in the commission where I met Tim Rourke, who works for the Charitable Foundation. He chairs the Governor's Commission, and he introduced me to Melissa Cruz. And Melissa, at the time, was on the board of Hope for New Hampshire Recovery. She's a person in long-term recovery as well. We became friends, and I found out about Hope for New Hampshire Recovery, and I got involved.
How did you get help for yourself? I mean, and were there any resources for you 4 years ago? And what has the struggle been like for you that is probably common for a lot of others in the same situation?
Well, fortunately for me, there was a time when I wasn't in recovery, and today I am in recovery. And for me, there are many pathways to recovery. There are many pathways. There are 12-step programs, there are faith-based programs, there are abstinence-based programs, there are many different pathways. So for me, fortunately, I did not need residential treatment. I did not need detox. What I needed was recovery supports. I didn't need self-help, I needed mutual aid. And that's really what recovery supports is mutual aid. It's support with peers, people that have lived experience, that have been where you are, have done what you've done, living the life you're living, and there to support you.
There's also support, I'm sure, for the friends and families of those who are in recovery or who are just probably learning that they need help.
Yes.
So I'm sure we'll talk about that and how Hope for New Hampshire Recovery is there. And
Yes.
Actually, what is the mission of Hope for New Hampshire Recovery, and who is part of that?
So Hope for New Hampshire Recovery is an organization that's been around since 1999. It was originally Friends of Recovery NH, and it was a group of individuals who really just wanted to help people sustain recovery. And the organization went dormant for a while, and 2 years ago it was reinvigorated. There were a group of us that got together, reinvigorated the organization, developed an amazing board of directors, changed the name so that it's Hope for New Hampshire Recovery, and changed our mission, and really set out to do some of the things we're doing now. So our mission is to get those struggling with addiction in New Hampshire well, and to provide recovery support services to those struggling with addiction. And the vision we have is that New Hampshire solves the problem of addiction.
Now, at the top of the show, I mentioned that we're hearing more about this, especially opioids, and how we understand people are becoming addicted by getting prescriptions when they're in pain or whatever, and that now they're using drugs off the street, heroin, and because they can't get the drugs from their doctor, and so it's a vicious cycle. It's not just alcoholism, it's drugs and both, actually, I'm sure. So what's changed since 1999? A lot has seemed to change.
Well, I don't know if anything's changed. I mean, addiction's been around as long as we've been around, right? Right now, there's an opioid crisis, which is raising awareness because it's affecting a different population. But still, the #1 killer is alcohol. It's a slow death. It kills more people than any other substance. But alcoholism usually kills people that are in a different age bracket. The opioid crisis has brought a level of awareness to addiction that has never been talked about before. And the reason is it's affecting everyone. It's been a 20-year problem if you talk to the medical community, in prescribing, painkillers and prescription painkillers, opioids. It's been a problem that's just been morphing. And, it starts younger because you have, young athletes who injure themselves, who need painkillers, and it's addictive. And, people are saying that they didn't think it was as addictive as it has become.
Even the physicians who gave
even the physicians, right? I mean, we all have some culpability in this, but where you want to point the blame. I mean, one thing I've always said is blame is just a way to take the uncomfortableness off of me and place it on you. So blame has no place here. It's how do we solve the problem of addiction. The opioid crisis has brought a level of awareness because, as you alluded to earlier, it's affecting families.
It is.
When we opened our first center in Manchester back in July, we were in a 900 square foot first floor apartment of a building with families in transition. And we saw 131 people come through the door looking for help. As of last week, we've had 14,000 people walk through our doors.
Oh my gosh.
And a large portion of them are family members, parents.
They're desperate.
They're desperate. They're asking for help, asking for resources.
Where do you go?
Exactly. So it's impacting everyone. And, Doris, doesn't matter the conversation I have. I can start to have a conversation with somebody about soccer, right? Being on the side of a field, watching my children play. Inevitably, when someone finds out what I do in this aspect of my life, the conversation turns to the right, and it's all about, I have a brother, I have a sister, I myself. We're all
have
affected.
A connection.
Have a connection.
I have someone I can talk to about it. Because let's talk about the stigma of addiction. I know that in my family, when I was growing up, there was alcoholism in my family. It was a quiet thing. We didn't want anyone to know. It was embarrassing. So no one got help. We didn't even know there was help then, or that people didn't know there was a problem until it really hit bottom sometimes. So how is that getting better? Now we're talking about it. It seems we're talking about it. It's people who may be working with you. You're not even aware that they have an addiction. So it's, as you said at the pre-interview, they're not what you think. People with addictions are not the type that you would think. They may be your friends. They may be family members, acquaintances, colleagues. Talk about that.
Yeah, stigma is a problem, and people don't seek help because of the stigma. It's not the alcoholic with, a bottle of whiskey in a brown paper bag, walking the streets. It's not a person struggling with a drug addiction with a needle in their arm, on the curb in the gutter. The people that are struggling with substance use disorder are your neighbors, are your teachers, are your leaders in community. I mean, one of the reasons that I'm so vocal about my own recovery is because, I can be the face of recovery. Until I share my story, people wouldn't think that I had a problem with alcohol. So it's really changing the way we speak about substance use disorder, and it's a disease. It's not a moral failing.
I was just going to mention that, that a lot of people who are not, don't have the propensity to become an addict to anything, have a hard time understanding, I think, that it is, you can't help yourself. It is a disease.
Correct.
And, but not unlike cancer, or you don't get the sympathy, you don't get that that help, people judge differently.
Oh, sure. I mean,
Right.
if you were to tell me tomorrow, gee, my son was diagnosed with a brain tumor with cancer and he's got 3 months to live, I mean, your house would be inundated with guests bringing flowers
Right.
and food and cakes,
Right.
and
Right.
you sit and say, my son is addicted to heroin, crickets. Nobody comes around.
Wow.
And the other thing too that, and I said this the other night when I was at a zoning board hearing, is the negativity is fear. Okay, so as humans, we spin from two different positions. We either spin from love or fear. And it's the fear of the addiction, because there are some components of addiction that drive addiction that people are afraid of, right? There are people that need to feed their habit. So there could be a criminal element that's associated with it. There's a behavior associated with people that are
True.
inebriated or intoxicated or under the influence of drugs.
Right.
It's a fear. So until you understand that fear and recognize that fear, it's those people. So if anybody takes anything away from this conversation that you've asked me to have today, it's how can we speak about addiction differently?
Right. Right.
And the more we bring it in the open to talk about and keep it out of the darkness, the stigma will go away.
It's going to take time, but
It'll take time.
But with the help from Hope for New Hampshire Recovery is just one other support system that's available.
Right.
If you're just tuning in, this is Community Conversations, a program produced by Concord TV. My guest is Cheryl Coletti Lawson. She's the board chair for Hope of New Hampshire Recovery. They just opened up a facility on South State Street in Concord, and had a ribbon cutting ceremony and with some of our officials. And let's talk about some of our officials. That brings me to funding. Now, is there money? I mean, this is a serious situation. The police departments, the schools, everyone is in this. This is really,
Right.
it takes a village to help.
Correct.
To help this situation. How do we get the funding that you need to, get rehabilitation? I mean, what is desperately in need right now to be funded that's not?
Well, we live in a state that is, we have a lack of resources, right? We are the 49th state out of 50 in limited resources, right? But we're number 2 with the problem.
I would never have thought that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so our resources are very limited. And those are resources for prevention, those are resources for treatment, and resources for recovery. And, even if we had $40 million today to dump into treatment, that still wouldn't be enough. So what Hope for New Hampshire Recovery is our focus and our goal is to help people sustain their sobriety, because the longer we can sustain your sobriety, or that you can sustain your sobriety with our support, the less likely you are to relapse, so that you won't tax an already overtaxed system from a capacity perspective. So there is funding that the legislature has allocated for recovery supports. They're in the process of dispersing those funds now. It's been in the budget for since the last biennium. So there is funding available to us. We haven't been able to access it yet. So when we started a year ago, people told us, you've got to wait, there's no federal, there's no state funding. And at the time, Melissa Cruz was our board chair, and 2 people she knew personally died of an overdose. And we just took the mantra, and we still have the mantra today, we're not waiting. So we went out to the business community, and we fundraise, and we ask, and because it affects everybody, right?
Sure.
It impacts everybody.
It's very costly for in an economy as well.
Correct. So, we start with donations from fundraising. We can talk about our workplace initiative in a moment. But we have opened the Manchester Center. We've just opened the Concord Center. We have a small center in Newport, and we're doing it primarily on donations. We've been given a couple of grants. We apply for every grant that's available to us.
A lot of work, right?
It's a lot of work, but it's a labor of love.
Sure.
And yeah.
Okay, so prevention. You really, as a communications professional, prevention is very important to try to, first of all, do you reach out to the schools? Is there an effort to reach out to parents? Because I think that parents of small children probably need to start talking about that when. I mean, how do you prevent? these situations from happening?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we can't prevent, right, from it happening. And I'm very diligent and articulate when we talk about Hope's mission. Hope delivers peer-to-peer recovery support services. And I strongly believe that because we are limited with resources, it's very important that we collaborate and we don't duplicate services. Because as you duplicate, limited resources fall to the bottom line, right, to the people needing services. So we are not in the prevention field, and we are not in the treatment field. So we don't provide prevention, we don't provide treatment. However, we connect people to prevention. We connect people to treatment. When we started our mission, Reinvigorated 2 years ago, we envisioned that we would help people through their recovery, but mostly on the back end. We would be there after they had decided that they wanted drugs and alcohol out of their system, that they received a clinical assessment, that they went through any type of treatment, that protocol that they needed, and we would be there to help sustain mutual aid recovery. What we have found in our journey over the last year is, because of the fact that we have such limited resources, we actually have people on the front end recovery as well. Dr. Goodman from CMC Medical, he describes Hope for New Hampshire as the navigator that a cancer patient has. Right? So
That's a great analogy.
We help navigate people through the process. So, you know, if people are struggling, they come to see us, and we help them identify resources. So we can tell you in 15 minutes, based on the insurance you have, if you have insurance, where you're eligible for what type of treatment. If you need treatment, we make phone calls to find the right place to get you a clinical assessment. Again, Hope for New Hampshire Recovery provides no medical, no treatment, no clinical services.
You're a resource. You give them the support, people who understand.
Correct.
And you give them some of the lay of the land, where to go, what to do, because they can make some serious mistakes, I'm thinking, or not even know what to do. They feel hopeless.
Right.
Helpless.
Right.
And so this Hope for New Hampshire Recovery, how many centers do you think that you'll be opening? And I can see it just really needing to grow exponentially.
Well, I mean, every community is raising their hand, right? And one of the things that we found, and we know it to be true, is the recovery community. There needs to be a community connection for people who are trying to maintain sobriety. So really, every community needs something. We envision having 7 centers open and operating by year end. Wow. So we're in Manchester. We've just opened in Concord. We have a small center in Newport. We'll open in Derry by the end of the month. We are targeting Berlin. We just got the planning board approval to open a center in Berlin, hopefully in June. We are waiting for the facility in Claremont. We have a facility there that we're opening, and we're working with folks in the Franklin area.
Wow!
So we envision those 7 areas, and the reason we identified those 7 areas is, it doesn't mean they're any different than other communities that I haven't mentioned, but these are communities that the recovery community, people that have sustained recovery, that peer-to-peer lived experience, they've risen up and said, we want to do this in our community. Because Hope for New Hampshire Recovery, what we bring to a community is resources, right? We bring our databases, we bring our systems, we bring our platforms, we bring our administrative expertise, our certification, but it's the community that knows what they need. What we will do in Concord is very different than what is being done in Manchester. So it's community by community based.
Right, you'd think we'd all be the same, but we really aren't, right?
Yeah. Well,
so what happens with, I know we could do a whole show on treatment, because we all know, those of us who've had any experience with finding treatment facilities, how difficult it is. So there are not enough treatment facilities.
Correct.
Still today, from years ago when my family was looking for help for one of our family members. So has it gotten any better?
It is getting better. I mean, there are some folks that are working very, very hard in treatment. I mean, there's a lot of great people in the state working as hard as they can. It's funding, and there is more funding that is coming available. There are more facilities that are being opened or expanded, but that's not a 12-month. That's not a 12-month fix. That's a 2 or 3 year fix, brick and mortar.
And it's ongoing too. I mean, you always are in recovery, right? Am I right? Even when you are in recovery, you want to be able to sustain it, but you need that support ongoing. All right. What happens? How can people help? I know that you can use volunteers,
Sure.
donations. What's the best way to get people who want to help? And
Well,
what type of help do you need? I know funding,
Well,
money.
funding's
Right,
a big
donations,
issue, right?
absolutely.
I mean, what I can say is if you go to our website, Hope for Recovery NH .org, and donate, make a donation. Because again, everything we do is based on donations. People that have lost loved ones, people that have struggled through this themselves, understand the need for that connection and that support, and they're willing to write a check. They're willing to make a donation because they understand the importance of it. From a volunteer perspective, we have so many people. I mean, envision 14,000 people walking through our centers, either wanting direct supports or just inquiring about help. We don't have enough funding to have a paid staff to be able to handle that magnitude of need. So each of our centers has a center manager, and depending on the volume of people that we serve, have a small staff of paid peer-to-peer recovery coaches. The rest of the folks are volunteers. So anybody that's interested in volunteering, reach out, call our center. We have volunteer coordinators at the center who are willing to put together that team of volunteers. I mean, we opened with the ribbon cutting Monday in Concord, and my phone's been ringing off the hook with people that I know in the recovery community that just say, how can I give back? What can I do? It might mean someone sitting at our center answering the phone. Someone sitting at our center signing people in when they come in. Someone coming into the center saying, what errands need to be run today? I need to go pick up a piece of equipment that someone's donating to us. So there's always a job and always a set of hands that's needed.
So people are listening, you want to help out, and you want to get help, you want to help out. What's the best way to do that for Hope for New Hampshire Recovery? How do they reach out?
Again, they can reach out through our website. They can reach out by going to the local center. And just because you use one center or look for resources at one center, you can have access to all the centers.
We have 1 minute. I want to ask you for those of you, Cheryl Coletti Lawson, she's the board chair of Hope for New Hampshire Recovery. And Cheryl, you had a quote for me, not a statistic for me. I'd like you to finish the program with that 10% and 10% who asked for help. So that just was staggering to me.
Yeah, well, the reason the opioid addiction is such a crisis right now is, 10% of our population present with substance use disorder. 10%. But of that 10%, because of stigma, only 10% of that 10% raise their hand for help. So if you have 100 people, 10% have the propensity for substance use disorder, but one person will come forward. And what I would say about Hope for New Hampshire Recovery is we are an organization that puts their hand out when someone puts their hand up.
Well, that's a perfect way to end the program. You have been listening, watching Community Conversations. I'm Doris Ballard, the host for Concord TV. This program is also a podcast. And Cheryl Coletti Lawson, board chair for Hope for New Hampshire Recovery. Thank you for all the good that you do.
Thank you.
For those who need families, friends of those who need help and those who need help. So if you want to help, go Hope for New Hampshire Recovery. I Googled it and it was right there. No problem at all. And they're on South State Street now. And by the way, I love the building. I love the branding. It's the butterflies. It's beautiful. You're doing a wonderful job.
Recovery's beautiful.
I know. Thank you. And
thank you.
Congratulations on what you're doing and on your recovery.
Thank you.
Good luck. And thank you for tuning in to Community Conversations.